The best Scrabble computer engines are significantly better than even champion-level human players. But as is so often the case, Nigel Richards is an exception. In his Spanish-language victory in 2024, Nigel found an optimal endgame move that took the best Scrabble engine hours to confirm. In this video, you'll see an English-language game between Nigel and fellow world champion Mark Nyman, in which Nigel actually outperformed the best Scrabble engine at that time. An incredible rarity that confirms his status as the greatest Scrabble player ever, computers included. This game takes place in 2016 at the legendary Causeway Challenge tournament, a 45-game marathon featuring many of the best players in the world. In round 23, the two champions squared off in their 7th game against one another thus far in the event. Nigel goes first, and with the more standard wife available for 20, he plays the surprising few for only 12. Engine Analysis approves of this choice, expecting that after Mark's overlapping plays alongside the F, Nigel will often be able to re-parallel with his W on the triple letter score for lucrative scores. After Mark's response of unpen, this is exactly what happens, as Nigel plays O for 38. Mark answers with Jew for 42, keeping pace on the scoreboard and retaining the S and D to hook on to few if he draws a 7-letter word. Nigel can add to the staircase with the 37-point Ha, but this move creates a huge S-hook with Sha that Mark can use to access the triple lane. So Nigel takes a 2-point sacrifice to play the safer Ba instead. Mark adds another step with Tick for 46, holding his S in reserve for a second straight turn to improve his odds of landing the first bingo of the game. Without an E for Jake, Nigel can't re-parallel Mark's last play, and he plays Raji for 24 alongside unpen, which is surprisingly his highest scoring move here. Mark also doesn't have an E, and rather than give Nigel a chance to draw one and hit that big play hooking Jake, he can play Ids for 37. Tacking on the S here scores many more points and cuts off plays that would otherwise extend down the triple lane for Nigel. But rather than Ids, Mark plays Its for 4 fewer points. He's likely holding on to his D for the feud hook, which will allow any bingos he draws to actually play on the resulting board. Nigel answers with Ticks for 30, blocking Mark from making high-scoring 2-tile plays in that spot, and Mark draws clunky tiles and dumps as many as he can with Vardy for 25, using the feud hook. Nigel doesn't have enough vowels to play a 6-letter word hooking O, reaching the triple, so he plays Doll for 16 instead, saving his lone vowel and setting up a new S hook. The L is a godsend for Mark, and he can play the stylish bingo of Longleaf for 74. However, rather than play it here and allow Nigel to potentially play 7-letter bingos in response, he shifts it over to the rightmost positioning, which is significantly better defensively. The N isn't a lucrative starting letter for 5-letter words, and Longleaf doesn't take an S hook, resulting in a much more difficult board for Nigel. Nigel stays patient and takes a solid scoring move that undoubles his T's in Tiz for 39, and Mark showcases fantastic vision with his response of Motific for 36, his highest scoring move. This play's biggest downside is the easily accessible triple word score it leaves behind, and Nigel uses it right away with Moop for 33, leaving great bingo tiles. Mark has strong bingo tiles as well, with the exception of the B and Y, which he uses together with Buy for 24. While this is a good option, it probably looks strange to Nigel that Mark would open the board like this with a good lead. But if Buy looks strange, that's nothing compared to Nigel's next move. With the Q and U together, Nigel could play Aqua to the A of Ragi, scoring 33 and leaving a solid nucleus of tiles to bingo next turn. He could even leave the A off with Qua and hope to draw a bingo that allows him to hook Aqua later. Or he can play something like Quite hooking Obe, scoring a solid 36 points and aiming for the R to play 8-letter words. Instead, he makes a crazy looking move of Quays for the same score. When you're trailing by 70 in a Scrabble game, you're not typically looking to make a play that shuts down the board and burns your most valuable tile in the S. However, this play is a specific response to Mark's previous play of buy. The unseen tile pool is remarkably devoid of high-scoring tiles, and tiles like the V would have played in other spots of the board for much better scores. If Mark is willingly opening the board with a lead, Nigel can be sure that his remaining 5 tiles after buy are extremely strong, and almost certainly include an S. Computer analysis doesn't like quays much at first, but when specifying a very strong 5-tile lead for Mark, the valuation of this play improves dramatically. The move buys Nigel a little bit more time by blocking as many of Mark's possible bingos as he can, giving him a chance to draw one or both of the 2 blanks still lurking. I can honestly say that no other human expert player would make this move here. But keep watching, it gets even crazier. Mark fails to draw a bingo and plays Agio for 13, and rather than fish on this still very closed board, Nigel continues pushing for points and tile turnover with ENIAC for 28. Mark is low on time at this point, but he finds his highest scoring bingo here in Licenser for 74, going up by nearly 100 and putting Nigel in serious trouble. Thankfully, Nigel can keep his winning chances on life support with Courants for 66, his only playable bingo. Afterwards, he draws the second blank and has the potentially devastating La Volted ready to go down from the L of Licenser, but it's Mark's turn first, and he wisely blocks with Larder for 14, after which computer analysis suggests that Nigel's bingo percentage is literally 0, even with a blank in hand. The board is just that closed down. The computer engine Quackle has a very advanced endgame solver, and when asked what Nigel's top move is in this position, it confidently says Cove for 27. This move leaves the tiles for Dita for 22, underlapping Quays for next turn, which Mark can block with Ray for 17, reducing Nigel's response from 22 points to 15 with Daunt. If all of that occurs, Mark will be up 415 to 405, but his clock has dropped into the overtime range, giving him a 10-point penalty. So the engine's optimal sequence will lead to a tie game for Nigel. Not bad, right? Well, this is where Nigel's brilliance is on full display. Instead of the engine-approved move, he generates an incredible new option here. Octa for just 6 points. This move sets up the triple word score for his D, forming Octad in a way that Mark cannot block productively. And with Nigel's leftover DEV blank, he's threatening an essentially unblockable Vide for 57 points. Octa is the only move that ensures victory for Nigel no matter what Mark does in response. Afterwards, Mark makes his best play of Derive, and Nigel gets his 57-point setup, giving him an 8-point win that increases to 18 after Mark's time penalty. Quackle wasn't able to spot Octa because it has so few of the attributes of a typically good Scrabble move. It scores only 6 points and doesn't even use up the worst letter on Nigel's rack in the V. Of course, the setup of the D is what makes this move so powerful. And the more recently created Macondo engine is equipped with an even better endgame solver and does generate Octa as the best endgame move in Nigel's position. But Macondo wasn't around in 2016, making this game an amazing example of a human player outdoing the best available computer engine. If you're curious, Nigel would go on to win the Causeway Challenge that year, winning 7 of his 11 games against Mark in the process over the course of the event. Whether Scrabble engines will ever surpass Nigel is an open question, but this game is another reminder that when it comes to the best flesh and blood human beings, there's nothing left to debate.